The smell of fresh-baked pie fills the air. But what if I told you that the slice in front of me wasn't what it seemed? One bite, and the truth behind the Golden Hearth franchise begins to unravel. Welcome to this black-voiced dramatic story, where secrets are hidden under every crust, and betrayal lies just beneath the surface. Don't miss a single twist. Subscribe now, like this video, and comment your thoughts below. Jackson Hart, the founder of Golden Hearth, walked into the Scranton location with a hollow feeling in his chest. This was one of the stores he had built from the ground up, a place where he had poured years of hard work to bring people the perfect apple pie, rich in flavor, full of nostalgia. But today, he wasn't here as the boss. He was here as a regular customer. And the moment he took a bite of that pie, he knew something was terribly wrong. The sensation was unmistakable. It wasn't just the flavor that was off, it was the betrayal. The pie that had always been a symbol of his family's legacy now felt like a hollow lie. The filling wasn't the fresh apples he knew so well. It was mushy, artificial, and overwhelmingly sweet, with a chemical aftertaste that made his stomach turn. What the hell is going on here? Jackson thought to himself, a sense of rage rising in him, but he held it in check. He knew this wasn't a simple mistake. This was intentional, and the person behind it all was none other than Karen Polson, the manager of this franchise. His eyes locked on the small label underneath the plate, Liberty Orchard Imports. He knew that name. It wasn't one of Golden Hearth's approved suppliers. This was fraud, plain and simple. Someone had knowingly swapped out the fresh ingredients for something cheaper, and Jackson was going to find out who. Fake, he texted Dumna, his VP of Field Operations, without hesitation. Check everything we have on Liberty Orchard Imports. Calmly, but with a growing sense of urgency, Jackson remained seated in his booth, observing the staff around him. The customers didn't seem to notice. The employees barely looked up. They were oblivious to the fact that Jackson, the founder of the company, was sitting right there. Jackson had built Golden Hearth from nothing, starting with just a small pie stand at county fairs, growing it into a national brand. He remembered the days spent in his mother's kitchen, carefully cutting each apple, making sure the filling was just right. Those memories filled him with pride. But now, looking at the slice in front of him, all of that felt like a distant memory. No, this isn't it. This is not what we built, he thought, frustration mounting inside him. The pie that had once been a symbol of hard work, family, and dedication now felt like an empty shell. He watched the staff as they moved around the kitchen, lifeless, uninspired. No one seemed to care about the quality of the food they were serving. It was clear something had gone terribly wrong here. Standing up, Jackson moved toward the kitchen. The workers called out orders, but they weren't paying attention to anything happening around them. No greetings, no eye contact, no acknowledgement that Jackson, the man who had made this brand what it was sitting right there. He made his way to the counter and greeted Karen Polson. She was standing there putting on a calm, professional face. "Hey, Jackson," she said, her voice friendly but with an undertone of something Jackson couldn't quite place. "The apple pie." "It's off," Jackson said, his voice steady, but his gaze sharp. "You switched the ingredients, didn't you?" Karen froze for a moment. The smile she had been wearing faltered, and for the first time, Jackson saw the tension in her eyes. "Jackson, I can explain," she started, but he wasn't interested in excuses. "Explain what?" "That you're replacing the ingredients I spent years perfecting with this?" Jackson gestured to the pie. "Do you think I wouldn't notice?" Karen looked uneasy, but she tried to stand her ground. "Look, we've been having supply issues. Ingredients have gotten more expensive, and I had to make some changes to keep the store running." Her voice was defensive, but Jackson wasn't buying it. "You think I'm going to just accept that? You're jeopardizing everything we've built here for a quick profit," Jackson said flatly, his anger seeping through despite his calm demeanor. "This isn't just about one bad batch. This is a decision, a calculated one." Karen's face tightened, but she said nothing. Her gaze dropped to the table where Jackson had placed the pie, the label of Liberty Orchard Imports staring back at her. "This isn't just a business decision. This is betrayal, and you've been hiding it. I'll make sure the truth comes out," Jackson said, his voice low but unwavering. The tension in the air was thick, and Karen for the first time seemed to realize the gravity of what was happening. She opened her mouth to speak again, but Jackson stopped her. "You've already made your decision. Now I'm making mine," he said, standing up. He knew this wasn't just about the pie. This was about the integrity of the brand. About everything Golden Hearth stood for. Jackson walked out of the kitchen, leaving Karen behind, the weight of his words hanging in the air. He knew this wasn't going to be easy, but it had to be done. He had to find out who else was involved, how deep the corruption went, and make sure that everyone responsible was held accountable. This wasn't just about saving a bakery. It was about saving everything that he had built with his own 2 hands, and he wasn't going to let it crumble without a fight. Tasha stood at the counter, her hands still dusted with flour as she caught a glimpse of Jackson Hart walking through the door. She hadn't seen him before, and something about him stood out. He didn't seem like your average customer. He was watching everything, taking in the details. Her instinct told her something wasn't right, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She had only been working here for a few weeks, still learning the ropes of the Golden Hearth franchise. Karen Poulsen, the manager, was tough but fair, always, reminding them of the importance of keeping the store running smoothly. But there was an undercurrent of something strange, something Tasha couldn't quite explain. The rules Karen set for the staff were clear. Never talk about the ingredients, the suppliers, or the processes. Everything had to stay in-house. Tasha didn't understand why, but she did as she was told. What could she do? She was new. But Jackson, there was something different about him. As he sat down with his pie, Tasha couldn't help but notice how intently he was observing the staff, the space, everything. She tried to ignore it, but a sense of unease crept up on her. Something felt off. When he picked up his fork and took a bite of the pie, his face immediately shifted from casual indifference to something darker, something more serious. Is it that bad? She thought, but she couldn't ask. She couldn't say anything. She had learned the hard way that speaking up here wasn't always the best option. There were whispers among the staff about things they had seen, things they had overheard. Some of the older workers spoke in hushed tones about how Karen handled things. It wasn't just about making the pies. It was about controlling what was said, what was seen, and Karen was good at it. She made sure no one stepped out of line. But Jackson wasn't someone who looked like he could be easily controlled. Tasha's mind raced as she watched him interact with Karen. She saw Karen try to deflect, smile through the tension, but it wasn't working. Jackson was onto something, and Tasha felt like a small part of her was too. She'd noticed things in the store over the past few weeks, little inconsistencies, things that didn't add up, the supplier deliveries that didn't match the invoices, the strange packaging that had appeared in the kitchen, and the fact that no one seemed to question it. Everyone just kept going along, doing their jobs, as if nothing was wrong. But Jackson wasn't just another customer. When he confronted Karen, the words hung in the air. "You've been replacing ingredients," he said, his voice calm, but the accusation hit like a bombshell. Tasha's heart raced as she watched Karen's face falter for just a moment, before she covered it up with a defensive explanation. Tasha had heard it all before. "We had to do what we could to keep the store afloat. The prices went up, and we had to make adjustments." But hearing it from Karen, the person who ran the store, made it feel different. Did Karen really do this? Tasha wondered. Was she part of it? She had heard rumors, whispers from some of the older workers who had been around longer, that Karen had started changing things in the store. Little things at first, like where the ingredients came from and who delivered them. But those changes had been slow, almost invisible. The staff had no idea how much it had escalated until Jackson made it clear that something was very wrong. Tasha could feel the weight of what was happening, but what could she do? She was just a small part of the machine, a cog in the wheel. If she spoke out, would she lose her job? Would she be punished like some of the other employees who had dared to question Karen's methods? She remembered Carlos, the assistant manager who had raised concerns about the quality of the pies. 2 days later, he was transferred, and no one saw him again. That was what happened to people who asked too many questions. They were silenced one way or another. As the conversation between Jackson and Karen grew more intense, Tasha's thoughts raced. Could this be the moment when everything changed? When someone finally stood up and exposed what had been happening behind the scenes? Or would Karen manage to cover it all up, as she always did? Tasha knew that Jackson was a man with power. She could see it in the way he spoke, the way he commanded attention without even trying. He wasn't afraid of Karen, and that was something Tasha hadn't seen before. She had never seen anyone challenge Karen like that. Maybe Jackson was the person who could bring everything to light, the things that had been hidden in plain sight for far too long. But Tasha was still scared. She had always followed the rules, stayed in her lane. Speaking up meant risking everything. What if I'm wrong, she thought. What if this is all just a misunderstanding? But deep down, Tasha knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. She had seen too much. The signs were all there, and Jackson had just uncovered them. She had never realized how much she wanted the truth to come out, how much she needed to know that what she was doing wasn't contributing to a lie. As Jackson left the restaurant, he turned to look at Karen one last time. Tasha could see the determination in his eyes, the fire that burned for justice, for the truth. He wasn't going to let this go. And in that moment, something shifted in Tasha. She wasn't sure what it meant yet, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't stay silent anymore. It was time for the truth to come out, and whether she liked it or not, she was now a part of the story. Tasha wiped her hands on her apron, her heart racing as she stood in the quiet of the restaurant, wondering what would happen next. Would she have the courage to do what was right, or would she continue to stay in the shadows, hoping that the truth would never catch up to her? Part 4. The climax and struggle. The air in the Golden Hearth bakery felt thick, like the weight of secrets was pressing down on everything inside. Tasha stood near the counter, her mind racing as she replayed the events in her head. Jackson Hart had left, but the feeling he left behind lingered, unsettling, electric. She had never seen someone confront Karen like that. Jackson had not only exposed the cracks in the business, but he had also awakened something in Tasha that she didn't even know was there. A sense of justice, a need for truth. But as the clock ticked on, the reality of her situation hit her harder than ever. The bakery buzzed with the usual chatter, but to Tasha, the voices sounded distant. She could barely focus on the customers, their orders, or even the tasks she had been trained to do. All she could think about was the conversation between Jackson and Karen. The way Jackson had peeled back the layers of deception that had taken root in the very foundation of Golden Hearth. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The storm is coming. The next morning, Tasha woke up to a wave of uncertainty crashing over her. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it. "We need to talk." It was from Dana, Jackson's VP. The words hung in the air like an ominous premonition. Tasha felt the familiar pressure in her chest, the same feeling she had gotten the day Karen called her into her office for a chat. It was that feeling, of dread, of knowing something was wrong but being too afraid to admit it. But this time was different. The silence in the store, the uncomfortable stares of the other employees as they moved through their shifts. It was as though something had shifted overnight. There was a sense that the storm Jackson had set in motion was about to hit full force, and she had a front row seat to watch it unfold. The moment of truth. Tasha found herself in the break room just after lunch, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at her phone screen. Another message came through. "Meet me at the diner, noon tomorrow. I'll explain everything." Dana, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over her. What should I do? Part of her wanted to run away, to bury herself in the comfort of ignorance. and just keep doing her job, pretending nothing had changed. But the other part of her, something deeper, something raw, urged her to act. Jackson had started something. He had exposed Karen's lies, the fraud that had poisoned the company's heart, and now it felt like her turn to choose. She knew that if she stayed silent, she would become complicit in everything that had happened. But if I speak up, Tasha swallowed hard. What will it cost me? Internal conflict and silent rebellion. The night before the meeting, Tasha couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, haunted by the faces of the other employees, the ones who had already started avoiding eye contact with her. She could sense their fear, but it wasn't just fear of Karen. It was the fear of being discovered, of being implicated in something that could destroy everything they had worked for. The truth had always been elusive, tucked away in the back of their minds as they carried out their duties like obedient soldiers. But now, it was inescapable. The lies that had kept Golden Hearth afloat were crumbling, and the weight of it all threatened to suffocate her. Karen's face kept flashing in her mind, cold, calculating. A woman who had manipulated her way to the top by playing everyone around her. Tasha could feel the pressure mounting. There was only one way out, and it was a path she had to walk alone. The choice was excruciatingly clear, but still, she hesitated. Do I betray the woman who gave me a job? Do I bring the whole house down just to expose a few bad apples? The guilt of it all gnawed at her, even as she knew deep down that silence would be its own kind of betrayal. Fool. The final choice. The diner was quiet when Tasha arrived, the smell of coffee and greasy pancakes filling the air. Dana was already there, waiting. She waved Tasha over to a booth near the back where the fluorescent lights flickered above. You came, Dana said, her voice low. She looked around before leaning in closer. Good. You're going to want to hear this. Tasha sat down across from Dana, her palms sweating. What is it? What do you need me to do? Dana glanced around again as if to make sure no one was eavesdropping before sliding a folder across the table. This is the evidence we've collected, Liberty Orchard. Isn't just some rogue supplier, it's a front. A shell company set up by Karen's brother. They've been skimming money from the company for months. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. She had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed was a blow to her gut. I want you to help us expose them, Dana continued. We have everything we need, but there's one missing piece. Someone on the inside. Someone who can confirm what's been going on behind the scenes. Tasha's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the folder, then up at Dana, the weight of her decision sinking in. She had the power to bring Karen down. She could destroy everything, but could she live with that? You don't have to decide right now, Dana added, sensing her hesitation. But we need someone who can testify, someone who knows what's really been happening. Tasha's hands shook as she stared at the folder. Her mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. Every part of her wanted to walk away, to pretend none of this was happening. But deep down, she knew that silence would never bring her peace. This was it, the moment where everything changed. The consequences. Tasha had made her choice. She would do what Jackson had done, what none of them had done before. She would fight back, expose the truth, and bring down the system that had been built on lies. But the moment she made the decision, she felt the full weight of it crash down on her. The fear, the guilt, the sense of betrayal, all of it came rushing in. She wasn't just going up against Karen Polson, she was going up against everything she had ever known. The fear of losing her job, of being blacklisted, of being forever branded a traitor. It all felt overwhelming. But there was something else there too, a sense of purpose, a feeling of finally being able to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. And so, with trembling hands, Tasha took the first step into the unknown, knowing that once she did, there would be no turning back. The storm was coming, and she was ready to face it head on. The conclusion and life lessons. The storm that had been brewing for so long finally reached its peak. The truth had been revealed. The system of deception, once so carefully constructed, had been shattered. Karen Polson, the woman who had manipulated the very core of Golden Hearth for months, was exposed. The company's once prominent reputation now lay in ruins, and those responsible were held accountable. It wasn't an easy battle for anyone involved, but it was one that needed to be fought. Tasha stood in the courthouse, watching the legal team as they worked through the final pieces of the investigation. It had been weeks since she had made her choice, weeks since she had stepped forward to help Jackson Hart and Dana. The days that followed had been filled with interviews, endless documentation, and the constant fear that she might lose everything. But now, with the truth out in the open, she felt a strange calm. It was the calm that comes with knowing you did the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing to do. Karen had been sentenced to prison for fraud, obstruction, and food safety violations. Her brother Charles, the mastermind behind the Liberty Orchard scam, was also facing charges. The other managers involved received sentences as well, but the damage was done. The company had to start over, rebuilding from the ground up with a new foundation rooted in integrity, transparency, and honesty. Tasha wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe. The fear that had once gripped her heart had been replaced with something much stronger, a sense of empowerment and freedom. She had been afraid to speak out, afraid to lose everything. But now, standing in the aftermath, she realized that true freedom came from living with honesty and courage. Jackson Hart had changed everything. His decision to confront the truth, to stand up for what was right, had set the stage for a revolution. The company, Golden Hearth, might have been on the brink of collapse, but Jackson had shown that with integrity, even the darkest of situations could be turned around. Tasha had learned that the right path is often the hardest to walk, but it's the only one that will bring you peace in the end. The lessons learned. This story is more than just about a corrupt company or a fraudulent manager. It's about the power of truth, the courage to stand up for what's right, and the consequences of allowing fear to silence us. Tasha's journey is a powerful reminder that we all have the ability to make a difference, no matter how small we might feel in the grand scheme of things. One of the most profound lessons is the importance of integrity in everything we do. Integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when others are watching. It's about doing the right thing when no one else is paying attention. The employees at Golden Hearth, including Tasha, had lived in a system where shortcuts and lies were acceptable because no one questioned them. But once the truth came to light, everything changed, and for the better. Another key lesson is the power of speaking up. Tasha was terrified to speak out, but in the end, her voice was the catalyst for change. By finding the courage to share what she knew, she played a pivotal role in exposing the truth and bringing justice. Sometimes we stay silent because we fear the consequences, but silence often allows injustice to thrive. Speaking up may be uncomfortable, but it's the only way to create the change we want to see in the world. Finally, this story is a reminder that the cost of doing what's right may be high, but the cost of doing nothing is even greater. Tasha risked her job, her reputation, and her peace of mind by stepping forward. But had she stayed silent, she would have lived with the guilt of knowing she could have done something and chose not to. The weight of that guilt would have been far heavier than the consequences she faced. Call to action. This story is just the beginning. It's a powerful reminder of how each of us holds the power to create change. So, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between doing what was easy and doing what was right? What did you do? How did it feel to stand up for the truth? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay updated on more dramatic stories that challenge the status quo. Let's create a community where honesty, integrity, and courage are celebrated, and where the truth always comes out, no matter how uncomfortable it might be.